The trip that I'm actually doing, like in the shortest version I can explain it, is to go by human power from my house in British Columbia, Canada, to Argentina by human power. So that includes biking and kayaking with the goal of climbing the highest peak in every country. So that's the ambitious goal right now. And I want to do something that, one, that no one's ever done, two, that would have a lot of cultural experiences and be at least a year long with different countries, and three, something that would really, really challenge me, and that there's I don't want to say a high probability, but definitely a real possibility of me not being able to complete, like a real personal challenge.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Mark Skye. Now, being in the outdoors and seeking out adventures has been a prominent feature of Mark's lifestyle. It's fair to say he's currently undertaking the biggest adventure of his life yet, one which he has called Expedition Squagua. This will see Mark make his way from Squamish in Canada, traverse 24,000 kilometres through 15 countries, all the way to the summit of Mt Aconcagua in Argentina. But this adventure won't just be one big long cycle tour. Mark has also included extra challenges along his route, which includes hiking to the highest summit in each of the 15 countries he travels through, finishing with the summit of Mt Aconcagua itself at 6,962 metres. Perhaps the biggest challenge of them all will be traversing 800 kilometres between Panama and Colombia on an ocean kayak. And I'm speaking with Mark today while he's in Panama City, getting ready for that leg of his journey to begin. I'm really looking forward to delving into the details of not just that massive adventure, but also learning more about Mark himself, his approach to living an immersive life in the outdoors, in a bid to inspire many others along the way. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Been listening to your podcast for months while riding my bike, so this is pretty exciting.
Oh, I'm glad that the pod's been giving you some inspiration while you're on your current adventure. It always fills me with joy to hear people are doing that, Mark, which means you'll know what's coming up, because the question that I start my show with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, Mark, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a cheap little bike with a banana seat, which probably a lot of your listeners won't even remember. These like really long seats with like a backing. And it's probably like a $20 bicycle back in the early 90s.
There's something about it, looking at those old school bikes. I don't know, they just exude an element of cool, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I certainly think they looked cool. Did you ride your bike much growing up then, Mark?
Yeah, I was biking from a pretty early age, got into mountain biking, probably got my first proper mountain bike when I was 14, and got into like cross-country racing and was mountain biking quite a bit. That was back in Ontario, and done a lot of biking since. But mostly, I absolutely love mountain biking. It's one of my favorite sports, and I do zero road cycling. So this is a totally different experience to me. I don't even actually like road cycling.
They're two totally different sports. I appreciate how different they are. I find personally, I think mountain biking there's more mindfulness involved in mountain biking, because you have to just be totally thinking about what you're currently doing. Otherwise, you're going to whack into a tree or not take a rock drop off correctly or something. I'm thinking a Canadian mountain biking, though, your mountain bike trails in Canada are really, really, techie, right? We're not just talking about flowy single track, are we?
No. Where I live in Squamish, BC, if anybody wants to mountain bike, I mean, our blues are comparable to a lot of blacks or double blacks around the world. We have probably some of the best and hardest mountain bike trails on the entire planet. We have, in my little town, I think we now have definitely over 300, might even be over 400 mountain bike trails now, or close to 400. We actually have people employed by the city who take care of the trails. And so between my house, just 45 minutes north, we got Whistler, BC, and 45 minutes south, we have the North Shore of Vancouver. So we have probably over 1,000 bike trails like within an hour of my house.
The only reason I have that insight into what the trails are like out near your area there in Canada, Mark, is because my awesome brother-in-law, about 10 years ago now, did the BC bike race.
Oh, yep. Comes through Squamish.
Probably like many Aussies, probably went into it, I think it'd be fair to say, a bit blind to exactly what he was lining up for. And that's probably quite lucky, because I think if he knew what it was going to be like, maybe he wouldn't have let himself sign up. So fair to say then, mountain biking, obviously transitioning to what you're doing, it is totally a different type of riding.
It is, yeah.
Cycle touring, like having everything that you need with you for each day's travel, like carrying a load, being on a roadside, having traffic pass you. It's very different to being in those beautiful treed forests in BC for sure.
Yeah, way different. I mean, mountain biking is one of my top sports, and I consider it a sport, whereas this is kind of a cultural experience. It's an adventure. It's a lifestyle. It's totally different. And the good thing is, though, is like mountain biking can be extremely challenging and intimidating, whereas I feel like bike touring is something everyone can do. It's a way of travel. It's a way to meet people. It's a way to experience the world. It's a way to see different cultures. I mean, they're just, the only thing in common is the bicycle, but they're completely different worlds.
They are. And actually, something that comes to mind is I've had the absolute privilege of speaking to some amazing guests in this just over a year since I started the pod. And it's not a shock to me now so much as it was initially, but many of my guests who've taken a humble touring bicycle all the far corners of the world don't consider themselves to be cyclists at all.
Right.
It's just the bike is the way they travel. And, you know, I've got guests who have done big adventures and then never ridden a bike again. And people who are on current adventures who said, you know, when I finish, I might want to travel, but maybe not on a bike. Maybe I'd want to go hiking or something.
Right.
But you are right. It is an accessible way to traverse an area and make yourself be able to see countries, cultures, people, isn't it? And obviously that was a draw for you. You have done a bit of travel prior to this trip though, Mark, fair to say, and you've lived in some countries yourself as well. New Zealand was somewhere where you got a real foothold into an outdoor career in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I went to finish my university in Australia. I spent a few years there surfing and then moved to New Zealand for a few years. I immediately got a job as a bungee jump master for AJ Hackett, which is now Bungee New Zealand. So I've assisted on like 20,000 bungees, done hundreds myself. And when I was living in Queenstown, by then I had already done some skydiving. So I was doing a lot more skydiving there. I really got into a lot more mountain biking, really started getting into rock climbing. And then I started getting into like kind of multi-day hikes down there, which turned into like getting a little bit more into mountaineering, starting to climb like easier peaks. Yeah, just started like really immersing myself into like all the different adventure sports. Bought a whitewater raft down there. So started doing some rafting too. Then we started like combining things. Like we borrowed a bungee cord from work, and I had a whitewater raft that I bought off my company. And we did like this 2-day adventure where we rafted into this bridge I found. This is like the old days on the internet. So we found this bridge that was like 70 meters, like 200 feet high. So we spent a whole day rafting this bridge. We got there at night. Then we're like scoping out how to get up to the bridge. And eventually we climbed up in the morning, set up a bungee jump off of it. Just me and my friends, we did a bunch of bungees, and then we rafted out the next day. And, you know, and then we started getting into like caving, just all kind of adventure sports. That's really where it took off for me, is in New Zealand. Just my whole passion for the outdoors.
New Zealand is a country where it's an outdoor lover's paradise, really. If you like the outdoors and you love adventure, there is a myriad of things that you can do in New Zealand.
100%.
I've seen people bungeeing in New Zealand, but I put my hand up unashamedly, Mark. It's totally not my deal. I'll stick to bike riding, I think, have my wheels on the ground.
Yeah, I've done hundreds of bungees, and I've done quite a few skydives, like both solo, obviously. And I've also, like I say, I've assisted on thousands of bungees, and 100% for sure, bungee's a lot scarier than skydiving.
And I guess the next step on would be like base jumping. Has that ever been something you've ever thought about or done?
It's definitely been something I've thought about since I was probably a teenager. It's been something I've been thinking about for the last 20 years. And it's definitely something I still think about very, very regularly. I have a lot of friends who do it. I've also lost a number of friends doing it. But it's on my mind. I would, maybe not daily, but definitely weekly. I don't know. I don't want to say I'll get into it after this trip, but I feel like it's going to be hard to avoid getting into it. I can't stop thinking about it.
I remember coming across a documentary of people who were like, actually, I think they got into base jumping, but they were also wingsuit flyers as well. Like there's You think you've found like the most extreme sport, and then you found that there's people who've made it even more extreme. I guess what's crazy to us is normal to others, right? And there's obviously a reason why people seek out that type of adrenaline rush and that type of thing as well. Have you always been that way? Like, people turning up for a bungee jump is very different to someone all of a sudden doing hundreds of them. Now, obviously, if you're working for a bungee company, that's going to facilitate that a lot easier. But have you always been seeking that type of rush with your outdoors pursuits?
Yeah, and I don't really know how to explain it. I've thought about it a lot. My parents are definitely, I have no one in my family who's into any of this stuff at all. But I can remember I think it was still grade 1. We had like this little book fair down the library. You could buy books. And there was a book, and now I can't remember what it's called, but I'll never forget it. It's just like this adventure book, and each like 2 pages like a different adventure sport. And when I opened the book, there's this guy sky surfing, skydiving with like a snowboard basically. And I bought that book, and I would like obsess over it. I like flicked through the pages. I read it like 100 times. I just look at photos. I had no one to relate to. I had no one to talk to about it. I grew up in a small town in Ontario. But from a young age, I just knew I wanted to do that stuff. And then so as soon as I turned 16, there was like one skydiving operation in Ontario that let people jump from 16 if you get your parents to sign off. So I got into that right away. And then when I turned 17, I got my driver's license. Like, there was like the highest bungee in Canada was up in Ottawa. It's like a 7-hour drive. So I remember like loading up the car with my friends. We drove way up there to do it. And then as soon as I went to college, I'm like, I gotta like, I don't know, just go somewhere where I can do more adventure sports. So Australia opened up for university, and then New Zealand, and I just couldn't stop. And I don't know what it is, but it was from a young age. I just had this in my mind that I just love or want to be around adventure extreme sports.
I mean, obviously the things that you're talking about doing, there is such an extreme side to it. I guess there's an element where it's extreme to a point. Like, you know, bungee jumping, there's a perception of the danger involved, but I guess there is a reason why it's safe as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, when you really look at it, the accidents that have happened in the past is for a number of reasons, that it's usually just the people operating and that they're using the cords too long or not the right cords for the right weights. But overall, it's quite a safe activity. Same with skydiving, and can't say the same about base jumping and a few other sports for sure. But a lot of it has, calculated risk. The 2 sports where I think or the few sports where it gets really tricky is, one is base jumping. The other 2, I would say, is like backcountry skiing and mountaineering, because you can calculate so much in adventure and extreme sports. But one of the things that even scares me about those sports, and I'm into both of them, is avalanches. It's you can test snow, you can understand conditions, you can go out when things are safer, but you still can't fully predict what's going to happen out there. With backcountry skiing, generally when the risks are a bit higher for avalanche, that's usually when the snow is also better. So you're just like, it's even more of a calculated risk. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I remember people who love the outdoors and stuff and go down the rabbit hole of outdoor documentaries. Probably my most favorite outdoor documentary ever is one called Meru. I don't know if you've seen it before.
Yep.
With Jimmy Chin, Renan Ozturk, and Conrad Anker, and Meru is the name of the shark fin summit that they summited.
Pakistan, I think.
Yeah, in Pakistan.
Yep.
And I think it was in the lead up to, I think, the eventual summit, because they took 2 attempts. Jimmy Chin, who is a renowned National Geographic photographer, outdoor enthusiast, has mountaineer in himself.
Yep.
But he got caught in an avalanche. And I remember they had footage of him after, because he was actually filming that day. And like, you could just see the adrenaline, the shaking in him and stuff like that. And this is an example, like what you're saying, you can be as experienced as ever, but the conditions on the day that something happens, and wow. Let's take it back a dial, though, so I can understand, obviously, with what we've shared so far, Mark, you're not someone that's going to be stuck inside the confines of a city and 4 walls. You need to be out there experiencing stuff, obviously. But your life sort of, was full on with New Zealand and adventures and things like that. You also had time on the Goldie and the Gold Coast in Australia and, enjoying surfing and stuff like that too. But it's fair to say, and you say this yourself, you also hit rock bottom at one point too, didn't you?
Yeah, I've had my struggles. I guess it started like after I left New Zealand, and I mean, probably some of your listeners I would think like a lot of your listeners to some degree will be able to relate to this. I had a partner who was diagnosed with cancer, and I spent years taking care of her financially, emotionally, physically, just being there for someone. And when you're in that world, you don't know when it's coming to an end. It's like you're in this dark tunnel and you don't know where the light's going to shine again. And it's pretty hard on the caretaker too. And during those years, I just started drinking a lot, kind of like took over my life. Basically, it was like all I knew with my life at that time. I mean, it's hard to imagine now, but basically imagine years of just like all you're going to do is go to work the entire day, come home, take care of someone, do the dishes, help clean up, do everything you can, work extra long hours so you can hire help at the house. Then your weekends come around, it's the exact same thing. It's 7 days a week for years. And it just got really, really hard on me. Yeah, I just looked to kind of, I guess, just drinking for an escape is basically the only thing I did besides work. So it was a tough few years for sure.
I don't have an experience of this myself, but I guess the catalyst to take yourself out of that situation, there has to be a level of self-awareness to do that. Because from what I understand, no one can sort of grab you by the shoulders and say, hey, Mark, this isn't the right way. You need to change things up. It's a decision that needs to be made by you to do that. Do you remember what the catalyst to change was for you?
There was probably more than one, but the one thing that really sticks out is a book I read. A couple of the chapters, there was 2 chapters. One was about long distance running, like ultra marathons, and the other chapter was about adventure racing. And I learned about the sport of adventure racing. So the long races go for like days nonstop. So some of them like a week long of like mountain biking, kayaking, running, climbing. I'm like, these are all the things I love. I'm like, there's like a sport that does this for like days or like a week at a time. And I started like looking into it. I'm like, these people are like superhuman. Like they're literally going for like 5 days straight with almost very little sleep. I'm like, I want to do this. I really want to do this. I need to pull myself out of this hole. And so this book actually, it's written by Travis Macy, who I've got to meet since then, and just really inspired me to pull it all together. And I actually completely quit drinking for just about, I think it's about almost just under 3 years, actually. Just like completely went sober, hired a coach, just really refocused my life, started eating super healthy, was eating super, super clean, cut out almost all processed foods, and just really focused on myself.
I often feel as a host, Mark, I get to sometimes get a real sharp insight into someone and their personality within the first few minutes of recording, because it's that insight into their early life and what's led them to do what they're doing now. And I'm sort of trying to connect the dots. But the big focus and feature so far has been adventures outdoors. It's not lost on me that it was the pool of adventures and this extreme form of adventure racing, that pulled you out of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It's just, I feel like literally I could just see my life slipping away. And I didn't mean like most of your listeners can relate to maybe the alcoholism part, but we all know someone who's been battling cancer. When it's that close to you, it can really change you. And the only thing I could think about is like, yeah, just adventure sports. I'm like, who am I? Like, I've lost my identity. I'm like, I'm not doing the things I love anymore. So it wasn't until I started getting into some of these shorter adventure races, when I did the first adventure race ever, it's like 6 hours. And I was so hyped at the end. Immediately I signed up for another race that was like 12 hours. And then I actually got on with like one of the top teams for that. They needed an athlete, and I was there. So I ended up winning that. And then shortly after, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my first 24-hour race, which like for me at the time was like, the idea of it was insanity to race for 24 hours straight. And so I signed up for like a 24-hour race, then a 30, then a 36. And then it got into like multi-day races, and ended up getting on one of the top teams in the world in the US. Just really got into it, and just, it changed my life. It got me back on track for sure. And the last race I had done was actually, I don't know if anybody has like Amazon Prime, it's a race called World's Toughest Race Eco Challenge. It was hosted by Bear Grylls, and it was like a 10-day race in Fiji a couple years ago. But it definitely pulled me out of like the deep, dark area I was in for sure.
Wow, I can't even imagine racing for that many days straight. I say that as, gosh, I have done ultra cycling before, so I have raced for a few days straight, so I do know that side of the fatigue, but I feel like adventure racing is total next level, because it's not one type of activity that you're undertaking. It's multiple different, and you've got to sort of, it's almost a bit of problem solving involved in it as well, in terms of how to do things and the manner that you're doing them as well, isn't it? And managing fatigue would be a huge element of it, no doubt.
Oh, it's a lot different than other endurance sports. Like, the clock doesn't stop, right? So if you have a 7-day race, the clock goes 24 hours a day. You sleep when you need to sleep. So usually like things like hallucinations become normal. Like if you go for 40 plus hours without any sleep, you start to hallucinate. You literally start to hallucinate. Twice in an adventure race, I fell asleep riding my bicycle. That's how That's actually how tired you get. It's like you're literally screaming and singing and like smacking yourself in the face. Anything you can do to stay awake. So yeah, I fell asleep riding my bike before. But yeah, adventure racing, it's for those who don't know, it's a very unique sport. And if you're into like different sports like trail running and mountain biking and other forms of kayaking, it's a combination of all of it. So for example, like a specific race or a general race, let's just say it's like 3 days. You might be like a 50-kilometer mountain bike, followed by a 50-kilometer run, followed by 20 kilometers of kayaking, followed by another 80 kilometers of running, followed by 200 kilometers of mountain biking, those kind of legs, and even other sports. And the other cool thing with it is there's no set course. There's checkpoints throughout the race. So like you have a topographic map and compass, no GPS allowed, and you have to like navigate that whole section of the course by finding little checkpoints in the middle of the mountains or the rivers or wherever you are until you can move on to the next leg. So there's this whole other adventurous aspect to it that like you could have 50 teams and everybody takes a different route.
By virtue of that, you're deciding of what type of activity you're undertaking to keep moving forward towards that checkpoint then too, then, aren't you? Like, is that sort of up to you as well? Like, I'm guessing, okay, well, we're going to bike this leg and then, you know, am I going to hike to a point to get to across the river, or am I going to kayak across the river, or am I totally like a newbie here picking that wrong? Like, is it up?
Yeah.
Like, are there set elements where, no, you have to bike this section, or is it up to you how you make yourself to the checkpoints?
Yeah, no, it's you're just a little bit off. So it's like, let's say stage 1 is 100-kilometer mountain biking. So you can walk, but you have to carry your bike. So your bike's with you for that whole leg. And then like you'll get to like a transition area and be like, okay, now we have like a 200-kilometer river to paddle. And there's some of the checkpoints might be off the river. So you have to stop early enough to run up a mountain, maybe get the checkpoint, come back down and keep paddling out. And then you get to another transition area. Then it might be like rock climbing, or it could be like stand-up paddle boarding. It could be like whitewater paddling. You know what equipment to bring at least, but you don't know the stages. And there's not like a triathlon where it's just like 1, 2, 3. It could be like biking, then running, then paddling, then biking, then paddling, then running, and then climbing. It could be like anything.
What activity do you enjoy doing the most?
I think transition areas. You're destroyed. Like, for example, if you have to do like 100K on a mountain bike, like it doesn't seem like that much. I mean, it probably does to a lot of people, but maybe to some people it doesn't seem like that much. But when you have a 50-pound backpack on your back and you're just bouncing on your seat for 18 or 20 hours, you're in so much pain. All you want to do is just transition. And then you'll go into a kayak and you just sit there for like, let's say another 14 hours of paddling. Then your arms are absolutely destroyed. Your legs hurt, your back's sore. You just want to transition. I mean, I love it all. And I love the pain and suffering. I love being out there with a team. I love the adventurous aspect of that there is no set course. Like it feels like a true adventure. And when you're out there, after like the first day, okay, is one thing. But once you're into day 2 or 3 or something, the whole rest of the world ceases to exist. The only thing in your entire world that exists is you, your 3 teammates, and that map. It's like that is your entire life is like that race. And you just forget about everything else in the world. And you're just super hyper focused on exactly the present and where you are now. And it's a special feeling and something I kind of miss doing right now.
Yeah, it's a unique way to be really properly mindful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Push yourself into the most extreme sport, and then after a moment, that's all that exists. I've had that come up with other guests. I mean, obviously, I've interviewed guests who've done lots of ultra cycling races and multi-weeks here, and it is something that they say that the big attractor is the only thing they've got to think about is riding their bike, going from this point to that point, eating food, drinking water, finding somewhere to sleep. Nothing else exists.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool when you can condense life and get rid of all your every other bit of clutter in your life and just focus on those set things. So I can see why that's an attractant as well. I wonder then, Mark, because if I look at what you're currently doing now, Expedition Squagua?
No, that's right. Yep.
Squamish to Aconcagua. There's almost like a long form adventure race within this expedition in a way, isn't there? Because you have definitely incorporated multiple different elements into the route that you're taking, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. And I've done a couple expeditions before that are smaller, but same idea. So should I share a bit about the expedition now? It's probably a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, get into it. Like, what motivated you to even come up with this one?
Well, as I mentioned before, like my whole background, I've always loved adventure sports and kind of being in this world. And I've always wanted to do something just really big and really special while I'm young enough and able to. started sharing some of this with friends or family, especially with family, you get a lot of pushback. Why don't you wait till retirement, or why don't you wait till later? Like, you're going to give up your business, your life, like everything you've built to do this, to go on a bicycle ride for a couple of years. But it's hard when I've been around a partner suffering from cancer for 10 years, an ex-partner. I've been to more celebrations of life, aka funerals and weddings. I've lost a lot of friends to extreme sports, and you start to realize, like, not everybody's going to get a full life. And I also don't know if I'm going to get a full life. And so planning something like this has been a dream of mine now for years. And it started off like kind of as a pipe dream, just things I put on my wall. And then it kind of started to grow. I like write more on the list to be like, okay, if I bike down to Argentina, like other people have done this, like what can I do to make it tougher? Like, can I really do this? And then so I went from a pipe dream to just starting to plan. I'm like, okay, what about if I got to Argentina, I should climb the highest mountain in the Americas down there? And then I learned about the Darién Gap, which is this wild area between Panama and Colombia. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to do all this, I want to do it by human power, which means I'm going to have to somehow get around that. And I started like, okay, maybe I can kayak that. And I'm like, if I go down there and I climb Aconcagua, what about climbing like the highest peak in every country? Is this possible? It sounds so simple, but it actually takes a lot of effort to start looking at, because then you have to start looking at what is the highest mountain in every country? What are the climbing seasons? How many kilometers are apart from one mountain in a country to another country? And then like once you figure all that out, which takes quite a while, and to see if it all actually like lines up, like how far away are these mountains? Then you have to start thinking, okay, if I'm going from this mountain, the season of this mountain in this country is like 2,000 kilometers apart. Sure, you can do it if you're flying or in a car, but is it possible to do by bicycle? So how many kilometers and how many meters of elevation? So then it's like, it becomes a whole nother thing. And so it took a long time to kind of start looking at this, seeing if it's possible. And then in the end, the trip that I'm actually doing, like in the shortest version I can explain it, is to go by human power from my house in British Columbia, Canada, to Argentina by human power. So that includes biking and kayaking, with the goal of climbing the highest peak in every country. So that's the ambitious goal right now. And I want to do something that, one, that no one's ever done. Two, that would have a lot of cultural experiences and be at least a year long with different countries. And three, something that would really, really challenge me, and that there's I don't want to say a high probability, but definitely a real possibility of me not being able to complete, like a real personal challenge.
I noticed, I think it was, I can't remember where I saw this from you, Mark, but you said, there's a reason I call this an adventure, not a trip. It's just the differences in two words there. Like, you know, you can say, oh, how was your trip? But really, this is an adventure. And to some degree, the outcome's unknown. I've always thought that has to be the case for so many people when they're seeking out something. Because if you know that what's going to happen along the way, why bother even seeking it out, right? Like the unknown element is what you're, in a way, looking forward to, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like, it's an adventure when everything goes wrong. Otherwise, it's a trip. You know, like, so many people said to me, like, for stage 2, which we can get into in a little bit, like about the kayaking, like, why don't you hire a guide? I'm like, why would I hire a guide? He's just going to show me where to go. Like, that's going to ruin the entire adventure. It's going to become a trip. Or so many other sections, like for the climbs or anything. It's like, there's a big difference between a trip and an adventure. A trip is something you plan or that you hire others to help you with. You kind of know the outcome. There's all these safety factors all around it. But an adventure is like, this is a true adventure. I just want to go out and experience everything on my own. Yeah, as you roll through different countries, you don't know what's going to happen. And that's what's going to make it. And even before leaving, I thought about it. I'm like, I have all these like really big ambitions about climbing these highest peaks, but I bet you when I'm done, my biggest stories will be things I never even thought of. It'll be like experiences that happened that I didn't think of, or people I met. And I think that's going to be the adventurous part.
Let's get into that a little bit here, because, you know, we're speaking to you. You're about to embark on that 800-kilometre sea kayak journey, leg 2. But leg 1, nothing short of an adventure in itself. To get from Squamish to Panama City involves quite a lot of human power to get there. You've correctly said on a touring bike, not on a mountain bike, not on the single track by any measure. I imagine there's been some unexpected adventures that have taken place in the last few months for you as well, Mark, no doubt.
Oh, yeah. Everything from like dodging hurricanes to robbery attempts to like climbing the highest mountain in Mexico, which is actually quite big. Sleeping in cartel beach towns, police waking me up on the side of the highway, sleeping pretty much anywhere and everywhere out in the deserts. I mean, I've got a lot of stories. so far I'm happy I've made it to here. So I can officially announce that I've finished stage 1 safely. This is actually the end of stage 1 is when we're chatting here while I'm in Panama City. It took me 9 months to get here. And yeah, I've climbed the highest peak in every country from leaving my house down to Panama.
Was there a peak that you totally underestimated there? Like you called out the one in Mexico there. Was there an element there where you go, gee, I thought this was going to be a lot easier than what it turned out to be? Like, have you found yourself underestimating the challenge along the way, so to speak?
Yeah. So most of I think I had a pretty good handle on, just because I am fairly fit, so I'm able to move up and down these mountains pretty quick. Orizaba, surprisingly, it's a unique, this fact, like many people don't know, it's actually the 3rd highest mountain in all of North America, just behind Denali in Alaska and Logan up in northern Canada. It's over 5,600 meters tall. So the top 600 or 700 meters is a glacier. It's just ice and snow, and this is in the middle of Mexico. So definitely, maybe I underestimated it a little bit, because when I got there, I knew I could only bring limited gear because I was on my bike. So my goal was like, okay, if I can go light, I can move fast, but does increase kind of the danger level a bit. So when I got to Orizaba, my friend Megan, she came and climbed with me. She's a adventure racing partner of mine. We've raced together before in the past. And so when we got there, like to the hut, everybody's wearing all this mountaineering gear. They have like full-on boots, steel crampons, axes, helmets, harnesses, ropes, everything. They got teams and guides, and literally we had running shoes, aluminum crampons, and an axe. So I definitely felt like, yeah, it was a little bit intimidating to start, but in the end, it worked out quite well. I'm used to kind of moving light and fast, and I think it is kind of more of my style. But the problem with it is I don't encourage other people to do it, because if you run into any trouble, things can get bad really, really quick.
Definitely. I could appreciate that. And actually, you sort of hinted on something that I've actually wondered, because it's not like you've set off to do this ride and you're going to get to the highest summit in every country and that's a hike. Like, some of this stuff would be verging on mountaineering as well. Like, it's not just hiking in some elements. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah. This is like climbing. Yeah. I mean, so Central America, yeah, they are mostly kind of hiking and just moving quick. But once they get to South America, the mountains, all of them are well over 6,000 meters. So it's a whole nother world. You have, snow, ice, crevasses, glacier travel, and proper mountaineering. Like, this is not sort of like your hike in the park or running up a mountain that maybe a lot of people are used to. This is not going up a 14er in Colorado, or this gets much more serious for sure.
My thought then, leading back to what I've been wondering with this adventure, Mark, is what are you packing with you on your bike to do this then? for so many thousands of kilometers, if you're on the tarmac, are you riding along with like the ice axe and the crampons in your gear bag, or are you acquiring them along the way? Like, talk me through your gear kit.
Yeah, from the start, I brought all my stuff with me, because I also climbed Mount Rainier in Washington on the way. And then after did Mount Whitney, and they had, the winter before, they had like 80 feet of snow in the U.S., like 20 plus meters. So Mount Whitney is still covered in snow. That was in July. And then, I rode actually through like the deserts of Southern California and Arizona during July, and northern Mexico into like early August. These are like the hottest areas in the world. And not only that, it was they had it was like the hottest summer in history. And then like they had this historic heat wave. So it's like 40 to 47 Celsius almost every day. Is like, I don't even know how I survived some of that. Like, I would literally bike most of the day. I'd go to bed at like midnight, just lay in the dirt, like in the sand. I didn't even care about snakes or spiders or scorpions or anything. It's too hot to open a tent. I would just literally just lay down next to my bike in the dirt for like 3 hours, and then wake up at 3 a.m. and bike until like noon. Then I would sit in like a fast food place, because you get free refills. I'd sit there for like 3 hours just drinking anything I could, and then I'd bike all day again. And then, when I got down to the Mexican border, they were asking me, like, what is this for? I'm like, I'm going to climb Orizaba. And so you can imagine it's like 45 degrees. I have an ice axe sitting on the back of my bike. They're probably wondering, this is a weapon.
That's exactly what I'm thinking, because actually it also then transfers more so. And, you hinted that you're traveling light. You're not taking all the kit that perhaps other people might be taking, but also it's not lost on me that to some degree, and we'll call it leg 3 of your trip, which is all of South America, right? You're going to be spending quite a lot of time at high elevation, which means the type of extremes of weather that you're facing, you're no longer in the desert there in California or Mexico. Like, you are going to be in some cold. So are you taking, like, you know, even like sleeping bags and sleep systems or tents? Is it like a 4-season? Like, what sort of gear have you taken for that element of things as well?
Yeah, so stage one, I was, like I said, I went pretty light. I mostly just needed the crampons and the axe for 2 of the mountains. That's why I avoided bringing a harness and helmet and tons of other gear that I probably, you know, should have had in a way. But just for a couple of days, it was hard to justify carrying it for many months. But stage 3 is going to be a lot different. So once I get into Ecuador, plan to probably get a trailer because I'm going to have to get someone or find a way to send all my mountaineering gear down from Canada. So like we're talking like big mountaineering boots. We're talking steel crampons, 2 ice axes, a helmet, you know, your harness, rope, and tons of other gear as well as like a winter sleeping bag and a lot more clothing. Because you're up above on these peaks above 6,000 meters, like all your cooking stuff, everything just changes. There's a lot more gear needed for South America. Definitely something I'm thinking about now, but it's going to be much, much different. Like I almost will for sure need to be pulling a trailer once I'm down there.
Previous guest of the show, Max Schnell. Bonjour, Max. He's I think actually just finished up his trip in South America, and part of that was with a trailer. I've had guests who've done that before, hauled that sort of trailer, because your setup on your bike there, I think you've got a pannier setup.
Yes.
Your bike, it's a Salsa bike?
Yeah, Salsa Fargo with a roll-off and a carbon belt drive. Been amazing.
How's not having to worry about waxing a chain been for you this trip, right?
Or adjusting gears or like nothing. I mean, all the gears have worked perfect since day one down to here. Like, it's flawless.
That's an element of your trip that you don't want to be too concerned with. Although, have you had some bad mechanicals at all to deal with?
Literally, I've had one flat tire. That's it. And I think it was from the heat of the road. I don't know because the side of the sidewall of the tire actually blew out. But it was on a day when it was like 45 Celsius. So like on the highway, it just exploded. The tire just completely blew out.
Oh, you could imagine, because actually like the heat on that asphalt is like ridiculous as well.
Yeah.
And you're cooking there. What's that aspect of it like for you? Because there's a big mental side to a trip like this, especially when quite a lot of it, would I be fair to say quite a lot of the momentum and the travel is almost monotonous? Like, it's the same, like it's pedaling circles, you're moving, like the terrain dictates whether you're up or down or the effort that it feels like. Certainly if there's a headwind, it's nasty. But the mental side of that, how's that been for you to reconcile with? Because, and I guess the reason I ask that, Mark, is on one hand, you're this person that's seeking out adventure in the extreme form, but on the other hand, you're finding yourself moving at a slower pace on that tarmac road as well. How's that been for you?
Yeah, it's definitely something for anyone who's going to consider doing something long to really think about. The one thing you really start to miss is community that I find. You know, so many people I've met are so inspired by me, and I really do love that. It makes me feel great. But so many of them also, so many people told me, I really, really wish I did this when I was younger. I'd love to do this, or I wish I could do this. And truly, I feel like 99% of them really don't want to do this. What they really wish they did is follow their dreams, really follow like whatever their wildest dream is. Because it's not easy doing trips this long. Do you see other people kind of like do similar trips, but they like break them down in stages over years? But when you're gone from your home, like I had to give up my home, I had a partner, I had a business, I had like lots of things that sort of have to give up to do something like this. So that always plays on your mind. It's like, did I make the right decision? Thought about a lot in the early stages of the trip. But after quite a while, you kind of start to get in the groove of things and it just becomes your life now. This is just what I'm doing.
Do you find in a way that that's actually been a good thing for you? Like, do you feel a lightness on your shoulders from making the decision to do this?
It's a good question. Don't know if I feel lightness on my shoulders because she felt really heavy on the shoulders. If anything, I had a lot going for me that I gave up. But I know even though things were tough at the start to get going, I know for sure I've made the right decision in the sense that like I would hate to sort of one day grow old, kind of look back at my life and have regret. That's the number one thing I really don't want to have in my life. I mean, I don't want to say the number one, but it's definitely it's always in my mind. Like, I don't want to have regrets about my life, about talking about wanting to do these things and just not doing them.
There would be an element where when you set off on a trip this big, especially with the elements that you've included there as well, Mark, you would have a fair idea of what the route's going to look like, which I guess means there's an element of a lot of planning that has gone into it as well, no doubt. How do you plan for the weather in this type of a trip? Because like you mentioned earlier when we were talking about unexpected moments, there was a hurricane that came through. That's not something you really ideally want to experience on two wheels. But, you know, when we're talking about, you know, South America, a lot of people clearly think about altitude and they think about the Andes mountain range, or they might think of the Salar de Uyuni, the salt flats in Bolivia or something like that. But there's also differences in climate. Like you've got to factor in how to avoid winter in the Andes, and you've got to factor in, does that mean I can avoid the wet season in places like Ecuador and stuff like that? Like how have you factored in the weather on this long-term journey of yours as well?
Yeah, good question. So definitely thought about it a lot. The weather is something you have to deal with. The biggest thing for me was really like looking at climbing seasons, especially like in the Andes in South America. Like you can't just be climbing these mountains any time of the year you want. So once you start to really figure out what mountains are within season in South America and how long it takes to get from one mountain to the other, then you actually need to work backwards and start when at a time that makes sense for South America to actually happen. So leaving my house on May 31st of last year wasn't ideal for me in the sense that I knew I'd have to bike through the hottest places in the world, like near Death Valley, through the deserts of America in July. But I had to do it in order to be able for the rest of the trip to work. So yeah, I'm against so much different weather. Like go from in South America to like, yeah, it's 40, 47 Celsius during the days. And then you get down to Mexico, and when you're on top of Orizaba, it's like probably -5. And then the Andes will be even more wild. And you're going from hot or warmer days in the sunshine. And then you get on some of these mountains, they're well over 6,000 meters. It's -20 at the top, -20 Celsius. So I have a lot of different clothes with me. And it's just part of the journey. Like I have to carry a lot more stuff than other people do.
Have you experienced multiple days at that sort of elevation with those sort of temperatures before doing things? Like I imagine, like what you've talked about before, you enjoyed snow sports, so obviously you've experienced cold weather. Oh my gosh, you're Canadian. Of course you've experienced cold weather, right? But what about like camping in the cold and like, you know, ice camping and stuff like that? Have you experienced that before?
Yeah, a bit. Like I've done some camping in the winters and in the snow. But to be honest, I've never done a mountain over 6,000 meters. So all of South America is just going to be very new to me. Being up that high is going to be very new to me. And getting to these mountains by bicycle is like a whole nother world that it's really hard to appreciate, even for me right now, and definitely on my mind and concerning. Like when people go down to climb the highest peaks in South America, they'll hire like a guiding company. Then they get to like a town, they get picked up at the airport, go to a hotel, stay in a city where they have all the comforts. Then they get driven 100, 200 kilometers out to base camp with like everybody around them. Like I literally have to go there by bicycle. So it's a whole nother world. And I don't want to talk too much about it yet, just because maybe we can do a follow-up call in like a year when I'm done. But it's definitely a concern for sure.
Insights from previous guests that I've interviewed, I know you're going to be up for some amazing dirt roads that may not feel so amazing when altitude kicks in, right? But they may not necessarily be the roads you're taking to get to a summit. Like, that's such a different comprehension there.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a country in South America which is giving you the most pause for thought from that perspective then? Like, how much of this can you research beforehand to sort of have an idea of what you might need to navigate?
I don't know if there's a country like giving me like more thought than others. All of it is quite concerning in South America. Like, I can't really find anybody to talk to about this sort of stuff. There's a lot of people doing the bike tours, as you would know, that you interview and chat with, and there's a lot of mountaineers out there. But to combine the two, it is definitely a different beast. Because getting up to base camp from these little towns, like, you get everything driven up there. It's one thing. You can set up your life in base camp again and get prepped. Whereas I have to literally ride my bicycle. And I have to think about things like, where do I stash the bicycle? How do I hide it? How do I keep it safe? Because it's my life. Without that bike, my trip's over.
It is your life. It's your possessions, right?
Yeah, everything.
Everything that you own is on there.
Yeah.
When you have to consider so much what you do take with you, what is an item maybe that you started off with that you thought, you know what, I really didn't need to bring this and you've ditched? And is there anything that you haven't brought that you go, gosh, I really wish I did bring this with me?
Honestly, I have a book I've brought with me, like a hardcover book, but I just wanted to bring one book. A few of the mountaineering pieces of gear I ditched in Mexico, but again, I needed those. So there really hasn't been anything I've ditched that I haven't needed. I probably have like little bits and pieces that I'm going to deal with while I'm here in Panama City before the kayaking leg. And in terms of some that I wish I brought, I think I'm pretty good with what I've brought.
You've had, what, is it 7-8 months now to figure it all out?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, probably getting close to 9 now.
And for my listeners, for context, we are recording this in March 2024. So it'll go out a little bit later, obviously. But, just for context in terms of what seasons and stuff we're talking about. So with weather then, like, is there some sort of, I'm not talking about the cold that you're going to face at elevation, but is there weather that you're knowing that's not going to be the most ideal, that you're just going to have to grin and bear through for what's coming up for leg 3? Like, are you going to be finding yourself in wet season in any of these places at all?
Very little. It's going to be mostly dry season, which is also, as you can imagine, better for mountaineering season. Just the weather windows, everything's better. That's stage 3. However, stage 2, which I'm starting in the next couple of weeks, we potentially be getting a lot of rain. But I've studied, so this is also another section that's going to be pretty wild. And I've been studying kind of the ocean charts or on the Caribbean Sea there for the last 50 years, and just having a look at the winds, the weather patterns, everything to get an idea for it. And that area, one of the areas, there's the San Blas Islands next to the Darién Gap and all this. So most of the year it's extremely windy there. It's a very famous area for sailing. But the two to 3 calmest months out there is kind of April, May, and even into June. However, that's when the rains start. But the winds calm down. So it'll make the kayaking very interesting, which will be starting in the next 2 weeks.
Hello everyone, I just wanted to take a quick moment to say a big heartfelt thank you to all of you listeners who have given me a small financial donation and supported me on Buy Me a Coffee. All of those donations do make a difference. They help to support the running costs of this podcast so that I can keep producing episodes for you each week. And I really appreciate all of you who've clicked on the Buy Me a Coffee link and sent me through a small donation. If you are listening and would like to support the show, you can do so quite easily. I've provided a link to Buy Me a Coffee. You will find it in the show notes. If you click on that link, and you can choose to buy me a coffee, which again is just a small donation which helps towards the running costs of the show. Thank you all so much. Okay, now let's go back to the show. Forgive me if I just sound like such a novice, it's not thinking correctly, but if I'm thinking first, I can't imagine myself in an ocean kayak. But if I was to be, adventuring enough to go in the open seas, I imagine dealing with winds would be potentially worse than dealing with the rain. But then, is that just something that you can say easily, but then after 3 hours of solid rain, you're going, you know what, this is actually not great? Or am I right to think that way?
I think you're more right to think that way. The winds can be a lot more dangerous out there than rain. Rain might not be pleasant, but the winds can be very, very tough, especially a headwind in a kayak. You have tides to think about. You're on the water, like in the open water. Like it's not easy paddling to start with. It can be quite dangerous too. So definitely the rain, although maybe not as ideal, I feel is going to be safer.
Sorry, Mark, if this is a really stupid question, but obviously this traverse of yours, it's huge. It hasn't really been done in the manner that you're doing it. 800 kilometers worth. What's the longest stretch that you'll be having? Like, it's 800 kilometers long, but are you sort of island hopping along the way, or how does this all work?
Yeah, we'll be island hopping. So I have a friend of mine, Frank Wolf from Canada. He's been doing kayaking, canoeing adventures for like the last 30 years. And it's really cool. He's like someone I've looked up to in the past, and he's coming down to join me. So I'll have him at my side too, which is going to be super fun and exciting. But yeah, we're going to have a couple hammocks, and we're going to walk from Panama City. We got these mid wheels for the kayaks just to pull them. So we're going to walk about 50 kilometers to a little town called Gamboa to walk around the locks where the big ships come through the Panama Canal.
That's going to be an adventure in itself.
That's going to be a big day, maybe 2 days. We'll see how that goes. And then, yeah, we're going to spend the next kind of 4 weeks or so kayaking with the goal of island hopping, sleeping on beaches, sleeping on tropical islands, whether they're inhabited or uninhabited, and potentially sleeping within mangroves. It's just, I know, I'm a little scared of. Just, I know, worry about, like, you have everything in the Darien that's could kill you. Anything from, like, pumas to, like, all the spiders to, like, all the big snakes. Like, everything lives there. Let alone, there's just that. But then you also have all the cartels, all the illegal immigrants coming. Like, there's a lot of stuff for us to worry about. And that's not even including the weather and the actual paddling.
It's fair to say, when we think about the Darién Gap, a lot of people, sadly, are taking this journey in the other direction, and they're taking this journey for very different reasons. It's not an adventure for them. They're making life-changing choices here, seeking out possibilities of a life, really, aren't they? And so you will be paddling past this. You'll be seeing this as well. You've obviously given thought to that yourself, no doubt?
Yeah, I guess when I was planning this, I really want to do everything by human power. I guess maybe the adventure racing background or whatever it may have been. I really want to take on this big challenge. I found maybe 4 different blogs of people doing a similar route, but not the full thing. So that what they did was much easier, not to take anything away from them. And then now it just feels a lot more real that I'm down here. And just also the last 8 months of reading articles, like the amount of immigrants coming through the Darien is wild. And I also thought that they were starting from Colombia. I mean, they are, but from the bottom and hiking through. But they're actually, last year, I think there's over 500,000 that came through the Darien, and they're taking boats across an open area of water from a little town called Nicocli or Turbo to the Darien. And that's the entire area we're going to be paddling. So the chances of running into some of these boats kind of heading north is, I think, almost certain. Yeah, now that it's getting a lot closer, there's definitely a lot more concern in my mind, and it does feel much more real. And it's no longer this fun, happy, hilarious adventure that I drew out on a map 2 years ago. It's very real now, which also makes it very exciting for sure, but definitely on my mind every day. And I do think about it a lot.
To me, there would be a heaviness that comes with that as well. To some degree, they're traversing similar challenges, but with a heavy load too. It is a dangerous stretch of water. Like there's nothing super easy peasy about what you're doing. Otherwise, lots of people would be doing this as well.
For sure.
I don't want to sound too over the top. There is life being risked whenever you cross this type of thing. You know, you're taking what you believe is a measured risk on that. And a lot of these people, they're possibly doing it in the other direction. They don't feel like they have any other choice. There is no life if they stay back. So they're seeking other opportunities as well. So imagine there's a heaviness that comes with that.
Yeah, there is definitely a heaviness that comes with it. And like I said, I'm thinking about it a lot right now. Some of it definitely does worry me, but this is an adventure I've been planning for years. And I guess it's what you can sum up in acceptable risk. I guess that's where it's at this point, is it's acceptable risk for me to continue this adventure.
How long do you think it's going to take you to traverse that distance there and reach Colombia then?
Yeah, so we're looking at the route we have now. When Frank gets down here to Panama City in about a week, we may refine things a little bit, but we're looking at about 800 to 900 kilometers. And then there's a lot of uncertainties, like there's winds to probably start, like heavy winds potentially, tides, bad weather, a lot of things to deal with. So probably 4 to 5 weeks. Under 4 weeks would be great. But yeah, it's hard to say for sure.
I'm going to be watching those weeks go past, Mark, and be looking for updates. I mean, I'm not expecting much Wi-Fi signal to be out there in the middle of the Darién Gap.
Yeah.
Far out. What do your family and everything think about this part? Is this the part of the trip that they are not so vibing with?
Well, probably until this podcast comes out. I don't know if they know all the details. I guess, like, I don't come from an adventurous family. And when I was planning this, my family thought it was insane. I don't want to say they didn't support it, but they didn't really support it in the sense that, like, it's hard for them to understand why I would give up everything I had in life to do this. You know, closing down your business, leaving your home, relationship, kind of everything like that to do something like this. But what's actually been really cool is in the past few months, like now that I've been on the road for almost 9 months, we have other family that are asking my parents about where am I? And then like their friends are also asking where am I? And they share updates with them. And then these people, like, whether it's their friends or our family, are asking them more and more. And I feel like for the first time, they're really starting to understand I'm doing something special and that their friends and our family is actually inspired. And then so it makes my parents, like, I think more understand, like, what I'm doing is more than just a trip. Like it's a life dream of mine. So I think they've come around a lot over the last few months, especially.
I'm going to ask a question which maybe they would look to ask. It's to ask my guests to tell me about a single day of their trip, a single part of their experience. So I'm asking you that question, but it could well be a family member asking your mum or dad this question. If they were saying, oh, what did Mark do today? Pick a day from the many days you've experienced so far, Mark, and tell me and the listeners all about us. Take us there. Take us to those moments. Be happy moments. It can be harsh moments. Tell me about a day on your trip.
All right. Well, let's picture this, I guess. Let's say you're in the middle of the desert in Arizona, one of the hottest places in the world during the hottest summer ever. You wake up at 3 a.m. in the dirt. You're happy you're alive because no spiders or scorpions came out and ate you. Then you just wake up, get back on your bicycle, deflate your sleeping pad, not your tent because you didn't even bother putting it up because it was so hot. Then you ride and you're on your own and you just ride all night, and people watching at home kind of feel like they're a part of it, but you got to remember when you're out there, you're completely on your own. So you have no one to motivate you. It is much different. You just ride all day. When by time 8 o'clock hits, the sun's out. It's over 40 degrees Celsius. All you want to do is just give up and go home. There's no one there to stop you from going home. You got to just always dig deeper. You end up biking all day, stopping everywhere, always checking your phone. At work, can I get the next water refills? Where am I going to get more food? What happens if this gas station's closed or I can't get water here or there? Is there going to be any shade coming up? Like all these questions, they're on your mind the whole day. You're always checking the maps. By lunchtime, just sit down and eat for a bit. And you don't want to stay there too long. You want to get as much water as you can, but you want to keep going because eventually you just want to get out of the desert because it's so hot. And then that's usually during the days when I get on my phone, I can chat with some people back home and bring me back to reality. I usually send a message, maybe some friend sends something encouraging or motivational. So if anybody wants to send me any messages, I really do love them and appreciate them because they do help me keep going. And that's usually when you question things like, what am I doing out here on my own? Is this worth it? Why am I out here? And it's sometimes it's a daily thing that goes on for weeks. And then other times you talk to yourself I know why I'm out here. And then I spend the rest of the day cycling again, just out there by yourself, listening to podcasts, thinking about life, thinking about what I'm going to do after. Just more than anything, I think just being present and being happy that even though life is tough, I chose this and I have the privilege out of very few people in the world to actually do something like this.
There's a few things that you brought up there that I'd love to dig into there, because one of them was, the need to talk to yourself, to motivate yourself. Why on earth am I doing this? This is why you're doing this. You're obviously having those discussions internally. When things get nasty, baking on a road in 40 odd degree heat is horrendous. Have you come close to just quitting this trip at any point in time?
I've definitely had thoughts about quitting, especially in the first few months. I think the time where I've talked to myself the most was after, say, 3 or 4 months. I was in Puerto Vallarta, and I spent about a month there waiting out the hurricane season. And that's really when I had a lot of time just on my own. I was off the bike. I'm like, should I keep going or should I just give up now? I've literally gone 4 months. I have another year and a half to go. How am I going to be able to finance all this? What am I doing? But I think what I try to think about is that the dream is a lot bigger than the day. I'm not doing it for that day. I'm not doing it to get through the day. I'm doing it to realize a dream. I'm doing it to have something to look back on one day that I can be very proud of. And potentially if I ever have a family or kids in the future, something that I can share and inspire with them to chase their wildest dreams. Because I think for me, it's something I think about a lot, but I think a lot of people, they kind of have these wild dreams about maybe something that they want to do or experience in life, especially when you're younger, as a teenager. Everybody really knows what their wildest dreams are. But as you become 18, 19, you start finishing high school, I feel like you start thinking a lot less with your heart and a lot more with your brain, which is the logical part of thinking. And you start thinking about a safe route, a career. What am I going to do next with my life? And I think a lot of people kind of forget about their wildest dreams. And sadly, life takes over and they never are able to fulfill them. And so that's definitely something I think about a lot. And it's something I can't give up on myself on. And this is something I really, really want to do. So even though some days are really tough and there's times where I just want to give up, it's something I need to do for myself. And yeah, I think the bigger dream is just worth a lot more to me than giving up now.
a lot of this journey for you has been on your own. So you have had the benefit of your own thoughts, whether you've wanted them or not, right? And you hinted that, you've had moments where you've had friends join you, you've got someone joining you soon. How comfortable have you been with being on your own for long stretches of time there as well? Has it been something you've had to learn to be comfortable with, or has that been something that you've experienced this many times before and so you're happy with your own thoughts days and days and days at a time?
So the only people I've had actually visit me is the last 2 weeks. A good friend of mine, Fez from college, has came to ride with me about the last 2 or 3 weeks into Panama City here. And I had my mom visit me in Guatemala for 10 days, which is really nice. So I took a break there with her. But the rest of the time, yeah, I've been on my own. I've met people. I've seen some friends along the way for like a day or two here and there. Ran into many strangers. But yeah, I mean, most of them on my own. And I think I'm pretty comfortable on my own. It's given me a lot of time to just think about life. I'm able to process everything I'm kind of doing. I'm able to meet new people. I've been open to new experiences. And I think it's actually in a way nicer on your own in the sense that you need to meet other people. I feel like I'd be closed off to like meeting certain people if I was doing this with someone right now, kind of looking back at things. So I think doing this on my own has been great. And yeah, I don't feel like I actually get lonely or anything. I think the one thing I miss, I don't want to say I get lonely because I'm happy being on my own and I'm happy doing this on my own. But the one thing I do miss is community. Like I miss having a good social network of friends or a partner around me.
I don't want to say you're at the end of the trip because you're not. You've finished leg 1. You've got monumental stuff happening for leg 2. Leg 3 is a whole continent.
Yeah.
There's so much ahead of you. As you said, there's over a year ahead of you really, isn't there? Or quite a lot ahead of you. But do you ever think about what it's going to be like when you reach the summit of Aconcagua and then what? Like you talk about the want for community. Do you see yourself as going back to Squamish in Canada and immersing yourself in community for a while, or do you think of those sort of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question and one that I ask myself a lot, and I definitely have a lot of mixed feelings about it. Yeah, I do look forward to kind of being back in a community, but as many people who do similar things can probably relate, that's going to be probably short term anyways, and then it'll be on to like, what am I going to do next? But in terms of after this, what I really love to do, I do enjoy speaking and I would love to get on stage with the one goal of inspiring others to chase their wildest dreams. That's something I think about a lot, and it's something like the message I would really like to share after this trip. And so, the one of those things like I mentioned is when I do this, it is to fulfill my dream. And I also feel I need to fulfill my dream if I want to inspire others to chase their dreams. Otherwise, I feel there's so many people out there talking about or sharing on social media, do this, do that, and they're maybe not a very great role model for what they're doing at all. So it's definitely something I think about a lot. And yeah, after I do want to get on stage and inspire others to chase their wildest dreams, whether it's speaking or whether it's, writing a book or whatever else it may be. But that's definitely something I want to do after this.
I feel like you've got a lot of experiences that you'll be able to share and speak about or write about. Have you been journaling any of this while you've been going? Some of my guests, they keep a daily journal of what they've experienced. Some of them, their journal is their camera and it's a journal of pictures. What about for yourself, Mark? Is it in your mind? Do you write things out? Like how have you been keeping a portfolio of experiences, for lack of a better way of expressing it?
I think for me, it's been a combination of the three. Obviously, I take a lot of photos. I do a lot of video. I make a lot of short videos that I don't post as well. Just things I'm doing, how I'm feeling throughout the day, that I intend to kind of use for some sort of film in the future. We'll see how that plays out. I don't want to speak to it too much right now just because I'm unsure how that'll play out. And yeah, of course, I also do journal. I don't journal daily like some others. I feel like I kind of journal in like every week or every couple of weeks. I'll like kind of, sometimes I just like scribble a few notes or something. And then every couple of weeks or something, I'll fill everything in from the last week or two. That's kind of what I've been doing.
Do you ever look back at them? Like, have you randomly flicked back through that and reminded yourself of what you've been through?
Maybe a little bit less on the journal, but sometimes when I'm on my phone because somebody asked me about something from the past or I'm sending a photo to someone, like I'll scroll through the photos and be like, wow. Like it actually even blows me away just like how far I've came and like the experiences I've had. I'm like, oh my God, I remember this happened. I can't believe I almost forgot about this. And so there's a lot of memories in these photos now.
That's awesome, isn't it? I mean, in photos, definitely, they really bring a flashback. I find like you'll smell something and it'll probably remind you of something. In fact, how can we get this far into a podcast and me not bring it up yet? Food. I have to talk about food. So are you the sort of person, Mark, that food is something you use to sustain yourself, or are there times where a certain meal is something you look forward to, or experiencing different flavors and stuff from different countries is motivation in itself as well?
Okay, so before I started this trip, I didn't eat meat for 10 years. I was pretty much plant-based for about 5 years and vegetarian for 10 years until I started the trip. However, when I started, I knew that I wanted to experience the cultural foods, and I knew it would be nearly impossible to stay vegetarian, so I was open to that from the start. So as soon as I got to Mexico, started eating tacos, and almost everywhere I go, I try and eat in the smallest, quietest local places. Like, unless I'm in a tourist town, I'm always the only sort of white person or foreigner in these restaurants or in like these little villages. And it's been amazing just to actually be surrounded by locals and really eat at the local places and the local foods. Been a big special part of the trip that I didn't think about as much before, but now it's just like, it's amazing. It's a big part of the trip. It's like just eating different foods.
Oh my gosh, it is. I know this is on the spot for you and probably impossible, but if it's not, I'd love you to tell me like what's something you've eaten at one of these places that didn't exist beforehand that was like, wow, that was a tasty meal. Like, what sort of food are we talking about?
Well, I guess it's just like the different, like, so in Mexico, it's all the different amazing hot sauces that they would make in the little villages because they're always homemade. Then they could get into like El Salvador, you have pupusas, which is like a famous food there, which is almost like these two like thicker, almost like pancakes, like loaded with food inside, usually like beans and other stuff. In Honduras, you have what's called baleadas, which are really famous there. They're almost like big soft pancakes, again, loaded with beans and veggies inside. You can get meats and like this creamy sauce that they put in. So it's just like wherever I am, it's just something different. And then as soon as you get to Costa Rica, they have their standard sort of foods here, which always includes plantains, which you don't have anywhere else almost. And then we'll see what South America has to bring. I think a lot.
A lot of these travels are experiences that you'll be lucky enough to have for yourself. I remember when I interviewed Katja and Martin, hello, beautiful Danish couple, they cycled the Americas. They went south to north. I don't know whether you're going to be going near Uyuni in Bolivia, but if you are, my gosh, their description of the markets there, that Bolivian market experience, my gosh, it catapulted itself to the number one thing I want to have if I make it to South America. If you haven't heard their episode, I encourage you to listen to it. And even if it's just that little part of it, like the experiences in that Bolivian market just sound absolutely amazing. The food, the colors, the smells, the activity that goes on there as well. I'm not sure if that's going to feature on your route, Mark, but it might be one you want to seek out.
I'll add it in. Yeah. Eating at these like local places like really adds to the trip. It's kind of like bike touring. Like you have so many people kind of backpacking. It's such a different world when people go backpacking. They take a bus from tourist town to tourist town, even though they think they're on this adventurous path or off the beaten path. But it's not until you're on a bicycle where you really are, in the sense that like you can't make it to the tourist towns most of the time. You can only go 100 or 150 kilometers a day. Like those are bigger days. And so you're in all these little villages with the locals, eating the local food because there's no other options. And it's amazing. It becomes a big part of the journey.
Oh, definitely. And the experiences with the locals as well. We talk about it every single episode because it is one of those things that just energizes people on these trips. I'm sure, like, what has the overwhelming experience been for you? Like, you rocking up into a town, you are in a non-tourist area. How do the locals perceive you there on your bike?
Yeah, mostly, aside from a few areas in Mexico that wasn't very comfortable, and mostly like people are super friendly, like really welcoming. I obviously look like I'm not from there, so they're much more open to me asking questions about what the food is and sharing it, and just I think even seeing the excitement on my face, like when I eat it and like it tastes delicious and stuff. And aside from just food, like I've had experiences like, for example, like I had stopped at one place to get a coffee. I had my bike outside and I had all these bikers park around it in Central America, like motorcycles. It's like a whole gang of them. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be really, really bad. And like I walked outside and they were so friendly. They were asking me where I'm going, where I'm coming from. And like one of the guys gave me a bunch of money. Like, I mean, equivalent like $20 Canadian, but that's huge. Like, it's just the idea of it. And I've had other people kind of pull over and chat to me. Like, I thought maybe they're going to rob me or something. They pull over and they're just interested. They come out with water or like drinks or like a snack or like try and offer you a few dollars here and there. And the experience with the locals is like, it's incredible. It's like, it's these little things that if I share with you, like these little stories, you know, maybe the listeners don't find them that exciting, but when you're the person experiencing it, it's what makes this whole trip really special. It's like these little things. It's not about the big thing about climbing a peak. Yeah, for sure, that's the mission of my trip, but it's these little things that I think I'll remember forever.
Yeah, it's those small moments that you can't ever plan for.
Yeah.
Give you energy in that moment on that day, right?
Yeah, totally.
That act of kindness or that smile from a stranger, or even I imagine the moments where language barriers have just, you've reached them and you go, no, I got no idea here, or, you know, those sort of things would happen too, no doubt, for sure, Mark.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
I'm excited for the rest of your trip. I must admit, gosh, I'm nervous for you for leg 2, which is about to begin. I will be honest with you there. Not that you need my nerves, so we'll channel that positive psychology and use the word excitement instead of nervous energy instead. But you've got such a massive adventure to come ahead. I know that people will be wanting to follow along with this. So how can people find you, find out more about where you are, what you're doing, and how your adventure's unfolding?
Yeah, for sure. I try and just post short little video clips on my Instagram channel, so you can find me at supermarks_adventures, or just like search my name, Mark Sky, just SKY. And I'll be starting to post my YouTube videos soon. It's been hard to be on the road and edit them, so I've been filming everything for it. It's just been hard to kind of get a start on. But the best place to find me is on Instagram, and please feel free to shoot me a message or DM me. Like any little message that's inspiring and motivating, like really helps me on the road when I'm on my own too. So I really do appreciate just getting little messages of encouragement. I really actually do like it.
Oh, there's the call to action, listeners. Bombard Mark and just think we can be that little moment of energy when he needs it through the day.
Yeah, I love it.
I will provide links in the show notes to the ways to connect to Mark's social there and find him on Instagram as well. My gosh, Mark, I could talk to you for ages because I know there's so much that I couldn't get into the details of. We have hinted I would totally welcome, connecting at the end of this trip after Aconcagua was done and hearing how it all unfolded for you.
Yeah, let's do that.
As I wrap it up, there's 3 questions I asked to finish my show with, and I ask it of my guests. The first one is, if you could pick a song and it's going to be the soundtrack to this adventure of yours, what song are you going to pick? And the reason is you get to have that song added to the Seek Travel Ride music playlist. It's a playlist created from songs from all of my guests, available on Apple and Spotify. So what song would you pick, Mark?
Well, probably the song I've listened to the most that resonates with me right now is Vacation by the Dirty Heads.
I don't know this song. Where's this band from?
I think they're from California, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right, I'm going to add it. I'm going to listen to it before I add it. Well, I'll add it anyway, but I'm going to give it a...
It's pretty safe listening.
Oh, no, it's okay. The thing that I love about this playlist is it's so eclectic. You've got people who have got pump and dance songs. You've got people who've got very reflective, contemplative songs. There's songs in German, in Spanish, Italian. So it's brilliant. I love it. So Vacation by Dirty Heads.
Yeah, listen to the lyrics. It'll make a lot of sense.
Last 2 questions. First one, you're going to be cycling your bike all day and you have a choice. You can go one way and that is up a never-ending hill climb, or the other way is going to be into a never-ending headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
I think like everybody else, the hill climb. You're making progress. Like, you're moving forward. The headwind it just destroys you.
Do you know whether, we've already talked about the winds on your kayak journey there and what sort of things you'll have to work through there, but do you know what the prevailing winds are going to be for you heading down to Argentina? Are they predominantly going to be behind you?
I don't actually know for sure. Can assume they're going to be against me just from how the winds on the ocean currents work, but I don't know for sure. I assume they'll probably change a fair bit too throughout the trip.
Yeah, and prevailing winds are one thing, but as every long-distance bike adventurer knows, there's always a headwind somewhere and rarely ever a tailwind. I do wish you tailwinds on your journey, though, that is for sure. Okay, final question. You're going to be riding your bike. It's just 4 hours, so it's actually quite a short day. But you have the choice, Mark. You can ride 4 hours on your own or 4 hours in the company of other people. Which one would you choose?
I guess since I'm alone almost all the time and I get the rest of the day to myself, I'd love to have some company here and there. I do love people. I'm happy on my own, but I do love people and I do love conversation. So that would be pretty nice.
I had an inkling that might have been what you would choose. Have you actually just, in happenstance, like have you traveled just parts of your trip with other bike travelers that you've met along the way?
Not for more than a few hours. And that's been only a couple of times. So not really, no.
It'll be interesting when you hit up into South America, whether or not you'll find more bike travelers on some of the routes that you're on, or whether your routes are taking you off the normal cycled path because of, heading to different areas as well.
Yeah. Well, I should clarify, I did cycle the last couple of weeks with a friend of mine from college, my friend Fez, which I've mentioned before. But aside from that, it's been on my own. And yeah, South America, I have so far no plans to cycle with anyone, but it would be fun to meet up with someone and at least spend a few days or a week or two with. That would be cool.
Oh, well, I hope for tailwinds and company.
Thank you.
No problems at all. Mark Sky, wow, what an adventure. And it's still unfolding. And I can tell just speaking with you that there are many adventures that lay ahead, whether they're daily adventures, big ones like this, or perhaps even the ones to follow. It has been an absolute pleasure hearing you talk about what's led you to this trip, some of the experiences you've had along the way, and what you're looking forward to coming up as well. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the show for our listeners on Seek Travel Ride.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. And keep up your podcast because they're nice to have on the road. And probably other cyclists can agree with me.
Thank you. I really enjoyed my chat there with Mark, learning about this monumental adventure of his and his motivations to travel in this manner. There are a few things that were key and important to him, really, weren't there? It was that sense of the outdoors, the adventure, seeking that sort of rush, doing things that would challenge him as well, and a human-powered element to it all as well. I think the thing that resonates or that I'm left thinking about the most is that concept of he's not just taking a trip, he's on an adventure. And it's the unplanned elements and the unexpected moments that happen. They don't need to be massive ones, as he said. They can just be those small elements, but they're the ones that mean the most at the time. I'm sure to those of you who are listening now, who are either on your adventure, had a big one, or perhaps are planning your own, these are the things that will resonate with you the most as well. And I certainly wish Mark safe travel for the rest of his journey. Now, if you've been enjoying the show and you want to find out a little bit more behind the scenes, learn a bit more about the guests and find out what's coming up as well, then you may want to sign up to our Seek Travel Ride newsletter. We release one every month and it just goes into a little bit more of a background to my guests, what they're up to, some tidbits of information, travel tips as well. Join up. I have provided a link in the show notes. You can sign up to the newsletter there and find out more about this amazing Seek Travel Ride community. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.